If you answered, I didn't, what if I told you that the average performance in the class was 45%? Uh, then how would you feel about that 53? What if I told you 32 out of 35 students in the class scored above 90%? Then how would you feel about that 53? Would your evaluation of performance change based on these external facts? And why or why not? I mean, obviously, right? Because you can compare yourself to others. 53% is basically a number in isolation, and a number without context is impossible to interpret. You really need to understand the context from which the data is pulled, and to do that, descriptive methods can give us a sense of the entire data set very quickly. So there's two different kinds of statistics that we'll talk about. Descriptive statistics, as I said, are a summary of the data. They're a description of the data. They're a quick summary snapshot and generally include measures of central tendency and measures of variance. So where is the middle and how different are people from within the sample? Inferential statistics, on the other hand, is testing about whether we can generalize our findings from a sample to the population. We'll talk more about that in our synchronous session. All right, so starting with descriptive statistics, though, we're going to talk about measures of central tendency first, and then I'll talk about measures of variance. Measures of central tendency, I think we're all very familiar with. And we're talking here generally about three different measures that give us a sense of the average score or what is typical. And those can be mean, median, or mode, right? Mean is the arithmetic average. Median is the actual middle score of all the scores collected. And mode is the score that appears most frequently. And interestingly, mean, median, mode can actually give us very different measures of central tendency. So, for example, if we look at the income per family in thousands of dollars, this graphic illustrates something that I think is really important to make sense of, that the average, the arithmetic average, the mean, can actually be heavily influenced by outliers. So when we look at income per family in thousands of dollars, it's skewed in a positive direction. And if you don't even have to really struggle too hard to figure out why, it's because there's some billionaires, right? So some people make an obscene amount of money. Think about Jeff Bezos at Amazon. And he is pulling that average really, really far over in this direction, really, really far over to the right because he makes so much money. But there is no corresponding balance on the other side of people who make negative money, right? So you can't, there's nothing to balance that out. So these numbers get pulled out in the positive direction. If you want to get an idea of the most typical household income, it's better to use actually mode, because mode is going to be the least affected by these incredibly rare outliers of like billionaires and trillionaires. If we look at the normal distribution and these three different kinds of measures of central tendency, mean, median, and mode, you can see that with a normal curve, if you have a normal distribution where the bell curve is actually a mirror of itself, mean, median, and mode will sit right on top of each other. But if you have a distribution that's either negatively skewed or positively skewed, what you see is that the mean is what tends to be the most strongly affected by the tails. Median is somewhat affected, and mode is the least effective. So mode is going to give you the most typical, although you may have reasons for wanting to use the median, and you may also have reasons for wanting to use the mean. But it's important to note this effect of skew on the measures of central tendency. By the way, one thing to take note of: skew is the tail. I see this in the media used wrong all the time. People tend to think the skew is the bump, but it's actually the tail. So if you see a distribution that's tail is out to the negative or to the lower values, that's negatively skewed. If it's out to the positive or higher values, that's positively skewed. Okay, so next up we're going to talk about measures of variance.